The 5 red heifers are now in a secure, undisclosed location in Israel. Plans include moving them sometime soon to a visitor's center in Shiloh, where the tabernacle of the Lord once stood for nearly 400 years.
Right here is the welcome center for the red heifer, Para Aduma. And I was just opening up I just opened up the Mishnah, and I was reading in Aramaic, and I saw the parasha of the Para Aduma today. Today I read it. I found it so interesting. So that's where, right here is where the red heifer will be housed. Right here. It's all being built. This is breaking news. Your group is going to come here and you're going to be like, Chaim told me that this is it. And it's going to be beautiful. This is in ancient Shiloh. And we are excited to keep you posted as to the progress. And this thing has to be so carefully done so that nothing will injure or cause this red heifer to be not kosher anymore. And so these completely kosher red cows, are now housed in ancient Shiloh, Binyamin Regional Council in Judea and Samaria, and a heritage center for them is going to be inaugurated just to talk about the red heifer and what it means for the Temple Institute, what it means for what does the Bible require. You can go back and read what the Bible requires for sacrifices to begin again. So the 1-year-old and 8-month-old cows are both fully red. They've never been yoked. That's part of what the rabbinical unblemished interpretations is. It's what the Temple Conference declared, that they can't be yoked, they can't have bruises. They got to be so careful nothing pokes them. They don't get to shed any blood of any kind. And so hundreds of participants are so excited to see these that have reached age. At least one of them.
Vincent says they plan to invite everyone to the red heifer ceremony that may take place in Passover 2024.
Everything is in place now with the red heifers. As long as they stay pure, one of them stays pure, then we have everything in place, including the priest.
Mamo says according to the Jewish sage Maimonides, there were 9 red heifers from Moses to the Second Temple.
It's not his way to write, but suddenly he said the tent will make the Messiah. We know that the Messiah will make the tent. Maybe we have the privilege to be one of these people that help the Messiah to do it. So we're waiting.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News, the Mount of Olives, Jerusalem. These red heifers are now between 1.5 to 2 years old. To replicate the ceremony mentioned in the Bible, they need to be at least 3 years old. And within that time span, they cannot have a blemish or anything that would disqualify them for the ceremony, even one white or black hair. According to those working on the project, the ceremony of the red heifer needs to be performed on the Mount of Olives and in a place that would have looked directly into where the temple stood. The land I'm standing on, bought 12 years ago, fits both of those standards.
It had to be exactly at the front, a place that the priest that made this ceremony can see the Holy of the Holy Place.
Rabbi Yitzhak Mamo owns the land here on the Mount of Olives.
And we hope that in 1.5 years from today, we can make here in this area the ceremony of the red heifer. That actually will be the first step to the temple.
Mamo says the ceremony needs priests who have not been defiled by touching anything dead.
The Temple Institute actually have 9 pure priests. They didn't born in a hospital, okay? They born at home. Because they are priests, so anyway, they don't go to any cemetery. And the parents keep them in a situation that they will not get to any cemetery, not going to any problematic place, and they are pure, and they are waiting. So we have the priest, we have the red heifer, we have the land, and we have everything ready. We just need to wait another 1.5 years.
So we believe that it's very likely that the ceremony would happen somewhere in the area of Passover 2024 out to possibility of Shavuot 2024. Somewhere in that timeline, the cows would be old enough and it would be the proper timeline for that ceremony.
Byron Stinson of Bonei, Israel, helped find the red heifers in the U.S. He says these would be the first in 2,000 years and that the process toward a third Jewish temple began when the Jewish people started their return to the Promised Land from the 4 corners of the world, culminating with Israel becoming a nation.
Talking about April the 8th, 2024, and it falls on or about the first day of the first month on the Hebrew calendar. which is very interesting when you go over and you look at the events of the scripture that happened on that day in history, going all the way back to the flood of Noah, how on the first day of the first month the waters of the flood had dried off the earth. That's when Noah removed the covering of the ark and looked out, and behold, the face of the ground was dry. In chapter 40 of Exodus, we see that's when they got the word of the Lord to build the tabernacle. And in verse 17 of that same chapter, we see that it was a year later when they had actually constructed that tabernacle on the very same day, the first day of the first month. This gets even more interesting when you jump down to 2 Chronicles in chapter 29 and verse 17, and it's talking about Solomon's temple and how he sanctified it on the first day of the first month. The very first tabernacle being reared up and the very first temple being sanctified all on the same day of the year. Well, when you look down to Ezra and chapter 7, you see in verse 9 that Ezra is leading the people out of Babylon towards Jerusalem to go rebuild or to build the second temple. You see in verse 10 of chapter 17 how after they had built that temple, they started to separate themselves from the Gentiles on the first day of the first month. And in Ezekiel chapter 29, we see that a word of the Lord came against Egypt on the first day of the first month. And in chapter 45 of the book of Ezekiel, we see that the second temple was cleansed on the first day of the first month. Could this third temple be cleansed on the first day of the first month? Actually, cleansing the tabernacle and or the temple on the first day of the first month goes all the way back to Moses. So to have this X across America to end on or about the first day of the first month makes it even more significant, in my humble opinion. So let's go back over there and let's look at this letter once again. The letter Tav, this X in the Hebrew language, or the cross. It means a mark, a sign. It speaks of ownership, or to seal, a covenant, or to join two things together. And the last, to mention that the exact spot of the X is a town with a name that means Little Egypt. I think we should all be praying to be caught away in the wilderness with the bride and that man-child that we read about over there in chapter 12 of the book of Revelation.